Okay, this is our reading strategies for Unit 3, Week 4, kind of breaking it up a little bit. We'll be talking more about these as we meet in small groups to reinforce these concepts, but they are some that you have heard before, so this may be more of a review for us. So first of all, let's talk about our comprehension strategy. And remember, comprehension is being able to understand what you're reading, and a strategy is something that we use in a game. It might be something that we use to win the game. So in the winning reading game, you want to be able to understand what you're asked to read. So a strategy that we can use is asking and answering questions so that we can better understand material that might be confusing to us. And as you've gotten older and reading more difficult text, this is extremely important to do as you go back and look for meaning, especially on new terms that you may not know, or if you read something and it doesn't quite make sense, to go back and ask yourself some questions about what's confusing to you. And then you reread the text before that section that was confusing to look for any clues that answer your questions. So based on the story that we've read, The Gulf Spill Heroes, when you first read that, you might have found some details about that story a little bit confusing, or maybe some vocabulary. So if we stop and ask ourselves some questions and then go back into the text to look for the answers, it usually helps us better understand the story. So when you read Watchers from the Sky on page 210, that's part of the story, you may get confused about how the pilots and their crews helped. So you could ask your question of, why would pilots and their crews be in charge of where to place floating barriers? And then reread that text to see if you can find out the answer to your question. So let's take a look at how that might happen. When you read that, or when you've read that story, Watchers from the Sky on page 210, if we look back, we might think, from the water, it was hard to see where the oil was spreading. So those pilots of those helicopters and planes, they could better see where the oil spill was. So they needed to help people place the floating barriers needed to see that oil. So pilots were technically in charge of getting those things placed in the right places. So this is your turn. If you want to take time to do that, you can later this week, but not necessary for today. So now let's talk about our comprehension skill. And a skill, remember, is something that we have to develop to make ourselves better readers. And one of the hardest ones to do is to find main idea and key details. But you've already done a really good activity with that by doing that worksheet that we did, where it was somebody who wanted, and then and finally. That organizer helps you really find some key details. So let's take a look at this. Main idea of any article is what it's mostly about. Each section and paragraph in an article also has a main idea. That's why it gets a little tricky, because we have little sections of a story that also has a main idea and details. So to find that main idea, we identify key details and figure out what they all have in common. Okay? So if we go back and look at that text, first we might find the details first. We have veterinarians and naturalists helped animals affected by the oil. Business leaders helped fishermen who could not fish in some areas. And members of a think tank created the sword to protect local beaches. So based on those details, we could probably say that as that oil spill reached land, other responders went to work. So we had veterinarians, we had business leaders, and members of this think tank that were all working together. But none of them was actually, well, they might have been, but they were primarily not out there on the ocean trying to contain the spill. They were working kind of on the sidelines, if you want to call it that. So Think about what you're doing when we talk about details and the main idea of a text. Make sure you go back and read and help yourself to be a better reader. You may stop the video right now.